throughout the day. So let me invite Mr. Frederick Edujemfi, who is the Director of Programs and Operations at CDD-GHANA, to give us a short welcome remarks. Frederick.
Thank you very much, Dr. Santi. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. And on behalf of CDD-GHANA, especially on behalf of my Executive Director, I warmly welcome you to this National Stakeholders Workshop on resetting Ghana's local governance system for enhanced effectiveness. We are particularly grateful to our partner, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and as well as all the institutions represented here today, for your continued commitment to strengthening governance and democratic accountability in Ghana. Today's workshop comes at a critical moment in Ghana's governance journey. While our decentralization framework, anchored in the 1992 Constitution and the Local Governance Act, remains robust on paper, growing evidence suggests that its implementation continues to face significant challenges. Our research highlights a clear gap between formal structures and actual practice, with issues such as political interference, weak accountability systems, limited financial autonomy, and low citizen engagement affecting the effectiveness of metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies. Public dissatisfaction with local governance is also high. Many citizens feel disconnected from decision-making processes, while critical grassroots structures intended to promote participation remain under-resourced and in many cases inactive. These realities underscore the urgent need for reform, not only at the policy level, but also in practice. We believe strongly that meaningful decentralization requires more than legal frameworks. It demands political will, adequate resources, institutional coordination, and most importantly, active citizen participation. Your presence here today is therefore encouraging. The diversity of perspectives in this room reflects the collective responsibility we share in ensuring that local governance works for all Ghanaians. Once again, I welcome you and wish all of us a productive and impactful engagement. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me now, with pleasure, invite Madam Clara Osei-Boateng, Governance Advisor at the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, for her remarks.
Thank you very much, Kobe. Permit me to stand on the protocols established by Frederick. My name is Clara Osei-Boateng. I work for the British High Commission, also called FCDO, as a governance advisor. For us, it is a pleasure to join this engagement this morning on a report CDD has recently produced on resetting Ghana's local governance system for enhanced effectiveness. We would begin by commending CDD for the good work they do in this space. Local governance lies at the heart of the social contract between states and citizens. It is at the district, municipal, and community levels that public services are delivered. Local government priorities are negotiated, and accountability is most directly experienced by ordinary citizens. So when local government systems function well, they strengthen trust, improve service delivery, and support inclusive development. And on the other hand, when they do not, the costs are felt most acutely by those with the least voice, that's the local people. So this research comes at a very important moment for Ghana. And although Ghana continues to demonstrate strong democratic credentials, they are central to Ghana's broader development trajectory. From FCDO's perspective, we strongly welcome rigorous, locally grounded research that interrogates these challenges honestly and constructively. Research such as this plays a critical role in surfacing evidence, testing assumptions, and expanding the policy space for reform. Importantly, the fact that this work is led by a Ghanaian local civil society adds to its credibility and relevance. Sustainable reform is most effective when it is informed by rooted in holistic policy debates. Therefore, we see today's event as just the beginning of discussions around how our local government reforms should be taken forward. Validations and also discussions of the report should provide us opportunity for us to stress test the findings, reflect on lived experiences of practitioners and citizens, which we believe are currently in this room, and sharpen recommendations. We therefore encourage all of us to engage with curiosity, candor, and also respect for different perspectives. The UK through the FCDO remains long-standing partner of Ghana in supporting effective, accountable, and inclusive governance. Our support is guided by a recognition that institutional reform is complex, politically informed, and necessarily incremental. There are no one-size-fits-all solutions. What matters is sustained dialogue, strong local leadership, and a willingness to learn from both success and failure. Therefore, looking ahead, the real value of this research will lie in how it is used, how the insights inform policy discussions, how its recommendations are interrogated and how evidence continues to shape reform efforts over time. FCDO remains committed to engaging with Ghanaian partners, government, civil society, and other non-governmental organizations to support reform pathways that are locally led, politically informed, and focused on improving outcomes for citizens. So on this note, we once again would like to thank CDD for organizing this event and congratulating them for their work and all that they've been doing in contributing to knowledge in this space. I look forward, me and my colleagues here, we look forward to a rich and constructive exchanges today and to continue collaboration in strengthening local government reforms in Ghana. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Before I invite our next guest to give his remarks, let me acknowledge Nakoko Adjoyi, Queen Mother of Adabraka. I grew up in Adabraka, so you are very, very, very welcome. And we have, I understand we have Dr. Gov'T here. Okay. Welcome, Dr. Gov'T. We also have Professor Prempe, as-well chair of the former chair of the Constitutional Review Committee. And I mean, one of the reasons why this conversation is important is, as you all know, we have the Constitutional Review Committee that's submitted its final full report to the President. I think that was end of January 2026. At the last time when the president met with CSOs, he indicated that an implementation committee is going to be set up. So, in light of the process that we really want to be fast-tracked, we really need to begin to have discussions about some of the CRC proposals and having a conversation on some of the themes that really are so important for resetting, using the word, the resetting Ghana's politics, economy, and society. So thank you all again for coming. I think, I forgot to also mention Niadi Kwaku, the fifth. Thank you very much also for joining. I would acknowledge others as we go along. But without delay, let me now invite Mr. Samuel Seth Pasa, Director of Local Governance and Decentralization at the Ministry of Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs.
Thank you very much, Virgil. So I also stand on existing protocol and wish to thank CDD on behalf of the Minister for Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Honorable Ahmed Ibrahim, who I'd love to be here himself, but conflicting assignment has made it impossible for him to be here. And he has asked me to be in his stead. So I'm basically here to say a few words and associate the ministries, associate ourselves with what CDD is doing. I just want to indicate that we are very happy that CDD has done this work, and research and development, what we call evidence to action, is critical for policy formulation, so that when we are pushing reforms, we are not doing it in a typical account with Bosremoka, but you are doing it with evidence, with research and data. So we are just happy. We don't want to talk too much. And the unveiling of the report will inform policy. Already we know what is happening, and the overarching thing we need to think out with as we discuss the issue is the Constitutional Review Committee report on local governance. I think chapter 5 or 6, 7. So we need to be very candid in the discussions and make sure that all those issues that are contained in that report are going to be pursued at the local level, at the downstream, sub-national level, not at the center. So the idea of local governance where development takes place at the local level, just as in other jurisdictions, is something that we should always seize with and push hard to ensure that our resetting agenda for local governance, it is practical, it is realistic, so that one day when you and I go to our villages, we have access to basic services. In other jurisdictions, they call it municipal services. It cannot be that you want birth and death. You want birth certificate or birth certificate, you have to come to Accra. Why? You want passport, you have to come to Accra. And I'm happy the reforms on devolution of education and health are being pursued vigorously by the Interministerial Coordinating Committee on Decentralization, where recently the CSO's engagement with His Excellency the President talked about the fact that if you want to be recruited as a teacher, go to your district. That is a novelty, and we need to push that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pasa. So we are going to get into the presentations. We have two presentations. The first one, which will be led by Jacob Amonu, is a presentation on the call for reforms and recommendation. And the second one will be led by Paul Nanakwabna Brampamensa, who is team leader for local and urban governance at CDD. The first one is really to give you context about all the reform efforts that has been ongoing on the local government decentralization fund, because that is also going to help us in our conversation when we begin to situate the study in the context of the reforms, and particularly some of the CRC proposals. You have to remember also that the local government system is older than the Constitution, because it was established in 1988. So it's been going for longer than our Constitution. So there's a lot that has, or efforts that have been made to make it work. And we have to understand at this point where we are thinking about how to, reform the structure and, make it more effective, what we need to do, what are our lived experiences, what are our insights that we can bring to this conversation. So I would invite Jacob to take us through the first presentation, and then he will be followed by, when Jacob is done, and you want to seek any clarifications, and maybe just a few questions on some of the things that he has said, we'll allow that. But what we are trying to do is that we want to marry the first presentation and second presentation, and then we can really spend time and engage on both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc. So today I play the role of a character in the Bible whose name starts with J, and led the people to Jesus. I guess you are wondering whether I am Judas or John the Baptist, but it actually depends on you. If you are the soldiers, then I'm Judas. If you are the people who are looking to follow Jesus, then I become John the Baptist. Thank you. So, like Doc said, this is to set the stage or context for the main presentation on the research. And so I won't take much time, though I'll be highlighting some of the key things that has gone on in terms of reform call, and then we can delve into the main issue. So this is an outline of what I'm going to be talking about. I have, I think, 30 minutes. So let's see how far we go. I might be a little fast in order to catch up with the time. So let's begin, and I'm happy Doc mentioned that this actually goes beyond, in terms of the local governance, has gone beyond the Constitution, starting way back 1988. But for the sake of our discussion, we will begin from the constitutional intent, which is to act as a catalyst for grassroots participation and ensure that dividends of democracy reaches every corner of the country. However, we know more than 3 decades now, implementation is something that is not reflecting what the intent is. There is persistent structural tension. The rhetoric of decentralization has been there, but the reality is that the center still holds a lot of control. And even if you come to the fiscal dependency, about 95% of the MMDAs depend on the center in terms of funds. CDD's work dates back to the early 2000s, where we have begun sustained advocacy for the election of MMBCEs. Between 2000 and 2008, during the President John Ejekun Kufuor's era, there was commitment to amend the Constitution to allow for the election of MMBCEs. However, this did not happen till he left office. Now, between 2009 and 2016, this reform agenda was pushed into a bigger reform in terms of governance, where the whole Constitution was being looked at as a pathway for local governance reform. The passage of the Local Governance Act 2016 Act 936 came into being, which consolidated the decentralization policies across the years. However, the core issue of the election of MMDC remained unresolved at that time. Then moving forward from 2016, this is when the era of manifestos became quite popular, and it was a document which the political class would reveal their intention for in terms of development for the nation. And so from 2016, you look at the MPP manifesto, they reintroduced the agenda for partisan MMDC election, the creation of regions, and the target in their manifesto as the liberating the energies of the people. For the NDC, the transformation agenda, the idea was to have a partial election model where we could start from the metropolitan and then gradually move into the other places. But the key thing was that they hold the position that we should not have the election on a partisan basis. Coming down to 2020, the MPP, before that there was the referendum after, which I will go into that, but because of that, they doubled down on the partisan election, where there was a launch of the National Decentralization Policy for 2020 to 2024. The NDC maintained the non-partisan election of MMDC, but also brought in the idea of the affirmative action, which was to them will be a catalyst that can take place within the local governance, where a lot of people, in terms of women, persons with disability, and the youth can be accommodated. Now coming down to 2024, the recent elections we held, the reset agenda, and then versus the digitalization governance. For MPP, the idea of election for MMDC did not come up like it did in the past, but then the main focus was centered on digitalizing the economy and bringing it down to the local government, whilst the NDC focused their resetting agenda, and one of the key things they promised was that they were going to transfer 80% of the 5% total revenue that is ceded to the local government. And then the 24-hour economy, which they profess that would mean that the local district assemblies will have to be very active in terms of working to enable private sector to take advantage of the 24-hour economy. Now zooming down to the 2019 referendum and why it did not come off. Basically, there were two key changes that we wanted in the constitution. One was entrenched and the other was non-entrenched. For the entrenched position, it was under the Article 243(1), which currently means that the president actually appoints MMDCEs. The reform proposal was that we would have direct election of MMDCE, and that this non-entrenched clause, we just needed 2/3 majority in Parliament to agree to this, and the change would happen. But what called for the referendum was mainly Article 55(3), which is entrenched, and with that was to give way for political parties to be able to sponsor candidates for the local government election. And with that, we needed to have 40% voter turnout, 75% yes vote to cause this change. Now, why didn't that happen? There are reasons, but three key ones stand out. One was the lack of consensus that could not be built between the two major political parties. And we know NDC sort of pulled out, was encouraging the vote, the no vote, and they had reasons for that. That they didn't want the chaotic nature of our politics at the national level to come down to the local level. And then we have a statement from the traditional authorities, the National House of Chiefs, saying that if we voted on political lines, it would affect or marginalize the chieftaincy in terms of their role within the assembly system. And so they also decided to go against that. And then lastly, CDD's research conducted or survey conducted weeks before the referendum showed that over 50% of citizens were not aware of the referendum, which meant that getting 40% turnout could be at risk. And so these were the reasons. In fact, this was one of the most significant opportunities we had to cause reforms within the local governance system, but we could not have that done. Sorry. Okay. Yes. So let me now zoom into the work of civil society towards this reform agenda. And I will be a bit biased because it's CDD's day, but I will talk about the other civil society's work as well. So way back in 2000, as I mentioned earlier, CDD has been in the advocacy and programming on decentralization, and our focus has been 1, local governance performance or local government performance, citizens participation, accountability, and evidence-based policy reform. In 2021, we conducted a survey, and the key findings include the following. 1, 73% of Ghanaians were dissatisfied with how the MMDAs were dealing with developmental issues in terms of challenges over a span of 5 years. And at least 7 in 10 respondents or Ghanaians were in favor of the election of MMDCEs. Just 20% said they still prefer the president to appoint the MMDCEs. In fact, in the same survey, we realized that assemblies were rated poorly when it came to issues regarding service delivery, responsiveness to citizens' needs, and accountability and transparency. Now, for those in favor of election of MMDCEs, we realized that between 2008 and 2021, the numbers kept increasing, even though you see some, what we call the speed ramp in there, you can still see that the number is increasing. Whilst those in favor of the president appointing the MMDCEs dwindled a bit. Now, if we move forward, out of those who wanted the election of MMDCEs, 71% of them preferred that the election be done on non-partisan basis, while 20% preferred that. Again, if you look at the trend, you realize that from 2017, the numbers or the percentage increased in favor of the non-partisan election of MMDCs, whilst that of those in favor of partisan election also dwindled by 20 percentage points. This is quite interesting because it will feed into CDD's position on voting for MMDCEs, because that is what the majority of the people are calling for, plus other reasons. But CDD's work goes beyond just looking at the constitutional changes or reforms, but also look in depth into how the governance within the local government sector is taking place. So CDD has implemented initiatives geared towards promoting good governance at the local level. One of it is the popular district league table, which we produced. It became the first data-driven competition among the district assemblies. We also have, or is implementing, a program called the I'm Aware, which strengthens citizens' participation and voice at the local level. We have the Ghana Cities Monitor, which tracks performance of urban governance systems. The District Accountability Index also measures accountability practices at the district level. We also did the Mining District Development Scorecard, where we looked at resource-rich districts and how to utilize that for development of the people. And then we have the evidence for development, which bridges the gap between research and policy by promoting evidence-based decision-making at the local level. Now, as I said, CDD is not the only civil society that has done work on this. In fact, IDEC is recognized for its role in promoting reforms in the local government sector. And key among that is the call for the election of MMDCEs on partisan basis, and there were reasons that were professed for that. But beyond that, INEC has also promoted reforms which goes beyond just the election of MMDCE to include the mixed member proportional representation at the local level, which will replace the winner takes all, including minority voices and political duopoly in the district. The gender quotas and affirmative action, where women-only proportional representation lists targeting between 30 to 50% female assembly membership by 2030. The Council for Local Development and Governance, where they are looking at giving our chiefs an honorable position, which indeed will take them continue to maintain their neutrality when it comes to partisan exposure. Then the decoupling of the administrative and political boundaries, where districts that are unsustainable needs to be collapsed into bigger ones. Now, having looked at the political and administrative aspect, we can now pay attention to the fiscal decentralization, where clearly we see that Ghana's constitutional percentage is 5%. However, in terms of what is actually sent to the district assemblies, has been hovering between 3 to 4%. And luckily for us, 2025 evidence shows that all what was promised in terms of the 80% has been fulfilled as transfers to the district assemblies. Now, if you compare our funds transfer, which is a percentage of our total revenue, 5%, to that of our neighbors, we seem to be around the lowest in the continent. And on the average, we have about 12%, and then if you go to the best practices, it should be between 15%. As we speak, Nigeria does about 10%, Rwanda around the same, Mali is around 12.2%, and I think there's 15% for one other country. And these are countries that you can say Ghana is even doing better, and we need to increase that. When we get to the CRC recommendation, their recommendation about the fiscal decentralization will throw more light on this. And again, we notice that the MPs have a share of this common fund. And from the position of CSOs like Imani, this is an overreach of the legal terms. In terms of the constitution, they are not supposed to be getting it. And so there's a call for 100% DCAF to be sent to the assemblies and not be given a portion to the MPs. Also, we noticed that internally generated funds have continued to be one of the weaknesses we have in the local governance system. One being the low economic base, poor property rate collection, and we profess digitalization as one of the ways to curb this. We can now focus also on the local traditional authorities being a key player when it comes to local development. And we notice that in the constitution, chieftaincy is mentioned, but it excludes traditional rulers from direct political and administrative authority. In many communities, the chief is the end authority, whilst is the enduring authority, whilst the DCE is viewed as the temporal political actor. And we notice some tension between the two, which governs around land and development dispute. We have political denial of development for chiefs who may not be in support of the ruling party. And then we also notice that there are vague consultation rules, even though it is said that 30% of government nominees should be done via consultation with the chiefs. But the chiefs say most often than not, we are only invited to cut salts or to inaugurate projects. So, and again, this partisan race makes it quite difficult when we are bringing the chiefs into the picture. But solutions have been professed. One of it is the National House of Chiefs gets a reserved seat for traditional rulers in the assembly system. INEC has proposed the Council for Local Development and Governance, where a statutory advisory body providing chiefs with an honorable and dignified governance role that avoids the assembly competition. the constitutional clarity on consultation, which has to be clear in order to replace the vague language with explicit enforceable requirement for chiefs' involvement at the district level, and then the preserve of chiefs' neutrality. Even though these are things we want to seek to them, we should maintain their neutrality. Now let's move towards the CRC's work, which is quite important for us, as it presents Ghana's best opportunity to institutionalize decades of governance lessons, and in this context, addressing systemic deficits in local government, decentralization, and public accountability. And in that regard, the recommendations of the CRC includes, not limited to them, but include in terms of highlight, one, the creation of the Independent Devolution Commission, where they would have the Central Technical Authority for Dissolution Policy, District Standards, Performance Monitoring, and MMDA compliance. In terms of composition or who heads it, the CRC proposes a merit-based appointment where the Public Sector Commission would put out advertisement. People who apply, they will be vetted, and then 3 of them will be submitted to the president to pick or nominate one. And that means that it promotes more objective selection of people to head or the commissioner, and then it also provides a single non-renewable 10-year term for the commissioner, a 3-year cooling off period post his or her service. The removal process is also on the grounds of willful violation, or what you can say, a difficult process that may not allow him or her to be fired by the president. And this will be done via independent tribunal. The CRC recommendation also talks about the election of the district chief executive. And here it replaces the presidential appointment by calling for phase devolution commission based on population thresholds and clear criteria. One of the methods of election, they propose 2 methods of election: larger districts, direct popular votes, while smaller districts will have 2/3 majority of assembly members electing their DCEs. The key conditions here is that it should be non-partisan, and the educational and professional qualification are required for those who will stand for election of MMDCE, and they would have a limited term of 2 terms maximum for 5 years each. So, and it can be consecutive or not. Once you are able to serve 5 years each, it means that your time is up. They also propose a reconstitution or recomposition of appointment seats reserved for 30%. 25% of the 30% goes to traditional authorities. Local women leaders will have 20%. Local small business owners 20%. PWDs and youth will have 20%, and the community-based organizations would be given 15%. In terms of fiscal decentralization and traditional authority, the CRC proposed a minimum of 10% of the national revenue allocated to the assemblies. They proposed a measure of the DCAF administrator into the devolution commission, prohibit central government pre-committing district assemblies, seed local informal sector taxes to the district assemblies, build the property rate collection capacity of district assemblies. And for the traditional authorities, they propose retaining Article 276, which maintains the neutrality of the chiefs, but prefers that the National House of Chiefs be given a formal enforcement mechanism to adjudicate complaints and violations of political neutrality provisions. Sub-district integration of chiefs and queen mothers formally integrated into the sub-district governance, giving social legitimacy and non-partisan constitutional status. And then coordinating body devolution commission collaborates with the Council of State House of Chiefs and Parliament to develop integration modalities for that matter. Beyond the CRC, as mentioned by Mr. Pasa, the government's national decentralization policy for 2026 to 2030 also seemed to pick from the CRC proposals and then go ahead to try and implement these recommendations. So one of it is the political and legal reforms, where educational sector devolution bill will be in the offing or have been passed, and to upgrade to 12 municipalities and 20 district assemblies to the next level, revitalize the unit committees and town councils or zonal councils. For administrative devolution, the MMDAs won't have the ability to manage their own human resource, where they are going to be hiring and retiring staff. And it's going to be on merit-based deployment to districts, rural districts, standardize the local HR system. For fiscal autonomy, transparent decaf allocation, timely disbursement, which we are seeing for 2025, and we hope will continue. Digitize the IGF mobilization to cut the mix, participatory budgeting and civic auditing for that matter. And for local economic development, they're looking at merging the fiscal planning and development planning unit, 24-hour market across all the 261 MMDAs. District business climate surveys will be conducted for SME to be able to grow. And then for participation and digital governance, relaunch the national sanitation campaigns, mainstream the district development data platform and the land use planning information system. Also the regional accountability series, which began from March, will continue. And then finally, to conclude, we would say that indeed the reform movement has matured from being singly pushed by maybe an agenda from either civil society or the political class into a multi-stakeholder calling for political parties, civil societies, traditional authorities, and citizens for these reforms to happen. The current system is currently at its breaking point. Evidence demonstrates persistent dysfunction across the fiscal, political, and administrative dimensions. We are calling for consensus building on the election of MMDCEs. We want an adoption of the phased reform strategy proposed by the CRC to also adopt a comprehensive reform package where clearly the unentrenched clauses which can be dealt with quickly. We should have a timetable for that, and then we work towards the entrenched positions, the entrenched clauses that we want to change. We are calling for strengthening citizens' engagement and institutionalization of accountability system, as has been done through CDD's initiative. Thank you very much.
Maybe you can just pitch somewhere. Can we catch our breath? If I try to do a test right now, what do you remember from the presentation? I think people will struggle. Because sometimes when it's presented this way, it feels overwhelming. So much going on. But you think of local government in very, very simple terms. When you are in your area, what do you care about? School, your children going to school if you have children, if you have brothers, sisters, access to good quality or potable water, whether your electricity is coming or not, whether people come and pick your rubbish, or where you can find sanitation services, security, transport. So when you reduce local government or the problems we have with local government, it's just about citizens getting services. That's all the things that we are talking about really reduced to. So over the years, the effort is, and how do you make this process work better for citizens, no matter where you are? Right? These are basic things that apply to everybody, but people seem to get it at different qualities, and the quality generally is not that good. So on the political side, the argument has been that if you're the leader of the district, who is the political appointee, does not get his mandate directly from the people, then he's always looking at Jubilee House for instructions. It's not, if he has to go for election every 4 years, it's what the people want that people. So let's change the system and elect our leaders directly. Like how millions in many other places. So the political agenda has been all about that, giving citizens the opportunity to elect their own leaders. And then there's other issues around representation. How do the assemblies represent and all of that? Then you have issues like the fiscal decentralization. How much money is going to the states? How do the to raise their own money, pay for their staff, and all these things? Then there's all the administrative issues. What kind of bureaucracy you need there, who's responsible for what. So if you take, for example, the assembly member is a representative for the electoral area or the unit area. But when the pipe is not working, most people will go to the assembly member that the pipe is not working, so can you go and get Ghana water or somebody too? So who really is responsible for the management of that village or town or whatever? We're supposed to have area councils. What are their role? All of those things. So there's administrative issues that we have to address. And then there's all the citizen engagement. How do we all select the projects that we want? How do we engage with citizens? If citizens have problems, how do they complain? Who do they complain to? And all of that. So I just want you to think different reforms in these brackets and along these themes, just so to kind of keep you focused on what the big picture issues are that we have to deal with. So we are now going to go into the study that the most recent study has on that. The motivation for all of this is that for a long time we talked about electing MDCs, but anybody that knows about the local government reform agenda, it definitely goes beyond that. If we are going to solve our problems, there are many issues around how the substructures work that we have still not fixed. The assembly members will say, oh, they don't give us any resources to do our job, so how do they expect us? So there are all these issues there. So we really wanted to understand in practice how the assemblies are working, how the area councils are working, how the union committees are supposed to be working, or whether they even exist at all, so that they can inform also discussion and proposals, some that have been made already in the CRC going forward. So I would like to invite Mr. Daniel Amato, one of our research managers at CDD, to start the presentation, and then he'll be followed by Nana Brapa.
Thank you, and thank you, Jacob, for walking us through the history of decentralization in Ghana, where we started from, where we are now, and what we need to do in order to get to where we all hope to get to. My role over here is also to set the stage, just like Jacob set the stage for me, for my colleague to come and present the findings. So basically what I intend to do here is just to walk us through the content of the presentation. What we are coming to do here this morning is basically to present the research findings. And the content, we have the purpose of the dissemination, we will speak to that. And then we'll also look at the research objectives and then the expected impact and utilization. We are also going to look at the findings on the various thematic areas that the study is focused on. And then the last bit of it, we will speak to the summary findings and then the policy recommendations. So now let's look at the purpose of the dissemination and then the research background. So the purpose of the dissemination workshop is first to share the findings of the recent survey that we have done. And as we share the findings, we also want to engage stakeholders gathered here to validate the findings. When we talk of validation, what we want to do is to look at what the findings is telling us and then ask ourselves questions. Are these findings really reflecting the true picture on the ground? We also want to discuss some of the priority areas that we think reforms should take place, and then also gather stakeholders' opinions on that, whether those reform areas are really the reforms that we need in order to move decentralization forward. Then finally, all the discussions that we are going to engage in over here, we will be collating those ideas that will come up to enrich the final report. So now let's look at the background and the context. I think my colleague has alluded to some of these things already. The Ghana Decentralization Framework, as we all know, is anchored in the Chapter 20 of the 1992 Constitution, but as the MC also indicated, we've been practicing decentralization long before the 1992 Constitution came into being. And also, the decentralization activities, the framework has been operationalized through the Local Government Act 2016, which is Act 936. The framework establishes the MMDAs as the highest political administrative authorities in the district, and the system is intended to decentralize authority, local development planning, and accountability by integrating the political leadership, administrative coordination, and development planning within the local jurisdiction. However, over time, we are all aware that issues have emerged and concerns have been raised regarding the effectiveness of the local government bodies in delivering responsive and accountable and citizen-centered governance. Okay. Also, we have had experiences with structural challenges, the main one being the fiscal constraint, then the unclear accountability relationships, the tensions at the political and administrative interface, as well as some of the issues that we have already raised. And then these concerns have led to renewed national debate on reforms, and the critical one being the election of MMDCEs to strengthen the district substructures. And in fact, my previous colleague alluded to the fact that some studies that CDD has done over the years points to some of these challenges. In the 2021 post-election survey that we did, which focused mainly on local government issues, we had about 75% of Ghanaians saying they were very dissatisfied with the service delivery performance of MMDAs. And in fact, it is not only in that survey. I do recall a number of studies that we have done in CDD from 2010 all the way to 2013, which was basically a project we focused mainly on districts in the Western region, Lobodem project. And we did it for 3 consecutive rounds for all surveys that we did in terms of service delivery. the performance ratings for local government